May I request Dr. Sunita Rai to take the charge. Dr. Sunita Rai is head of the Department of Pathology in Shri Balaji Action Cancer Institute and Shri Balaji Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi. So Dr. Sunita Rai, now may I request you to introduce our speaker for the session, Dr. Preet Kaur.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome you all for joining this session. I am Dr. Sunita Rai, working as a lab head in Balaji Action Institute, and today's topic of this session is approach to anemia. And to present this, we have Dr. Preet Kaur, who is presently working as a lab head and in Path Lab and Diagnostics. She is NABL and NABH SSI 2, and she formerly worked in Lal Path Lab also. So now I would like to invite Dr. Preet to join and start the presentation.
Okay, good morning, everybody. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, Dr. Jayan and his team, for having put up such a wonderful, comprehensive virtual conference and making me a part of it. Today, I shall be speaking upon what should be the approach to anemia right from the basic test. And to start with, anemia by far is one of the most common hematological disorders so far. So if you look at the global statistics also, as per WHO, if you look at this map, around 2 billion people are still affected by anemia, which is roughly around 25% of the population. And if you look at the age-wise prevalence, it is highest in the preschool children, followed by the pregnant, non-pregnant women, and then the elderly population. This is when I talk about the global population. If you look at this map, these darker colored countries are the ones which are most severely affected. How about the Indian scenario? It is no different. If you compare the Indian scenario with almost 16 major countries, the prevalence of anemia in India is about of the order of 40%, which is like quite high. And the second highest is South Africa, which is only 15%. So such is the grave condition in India itself. And when you look at the age-wise distribution, again, children are the ones which are most commonly affected, followed by the non-pregnant, pregnant women, and the elderly. And this is the high burden in India, despite having run the anemia control program for over 50 years, 50 long years, and still we have not been able to combat it. And if you look at this Indian map, these darker colored states are the ones which have the severe prevalence of anemia. And to name them, few of them are like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, so-called, highly metropolitan cities, metropolitan states. So whatever reason, population density or whatever, but they have a very high severe prevalence of anemia. Coming next to what is anemia. Before we start, what is the approach to anemia? It is important to know why and how anemia is important. So anemia is not a symptom in itself, it is a clinical sign. So when I say clinical sign of underlying disease, means there is an underlying disease. We need to investigate, divulge deep inside to know what exactly is the disease. If we only treat anemia, it's not going to help. There will be a recurrence of anemia itself. Plus, it is not a single disease. It is one of the constituents of all the polymorphic complex which we are dealing in the patient. So we need to hunt, delve deep to look out what other conditions are present in the patient. Do we ignore a fever without investigations? We don't. So then how do we ignore anemia or low hemoglobin? We go inside, we check out what other investigations, and we find out the cause. The diagnosis is not that simple. We'll see in the subsequent slides to come. It's very common, we already discussed. And yes, the treatment is going to depend on the cause and not only the symptomatic correction. If a practitioner or a clinician just corrects the anemia picture and is happy and gay, it's not going to help. The cause is still there. The underlying pathology is still working. So to define anemia, we know it is the reduction in the concentration of circulating hemoglobin and hence the circulation of red blood cell mass and thereby the oxygen carrying capacity as well. What are the normal hemoglobin levels? For women, it is 12 to 15 grams per deciliter and for men, it is 14 to 17 grams per deciliter. As we already discussed, it is by far the most common hematological disorder. Why is it important to study the RBC lineage? From the perspective of knowing where exactly is the pathology, where exactly is the defect occurring. Is there a maturation arrest? Is there a production defect? Is there a hemolysis? We definitely need to know who are the grandparents. So let us look at them. This is a summary of the RBC life cycle. So the factory is basically the bone marrow, be it younger kids, be it neonates, be it adults. The factory is bone marrow. Once released from bone marrow, the RBC stays in the circulation for roughly around 120 days, plus minus 10 days. From there, it gets cleared into the spleen. The RBC divides into its constituent parts. Some of them go for recycling, some of them go to the liver, then the gut and the kidney back to for excretion. And then again from bone marrow to circulation to spleen and the excretory organs. This is the basic cycle. So this is the factory I just told about. So this is the high bone marrow picture. Sternum, pelvis, vertebrae, all these bone marrows, they are capable of producing RBCs. 75% of the marrow is dedicated for production of WBCs. Around 25% roughly is for RBCs. So the basic ratio is erythroid to granulocyte ratio is 1:3. But this ratio will be increased in anemia. So how about erythropoiesis? When you look at this picture, we find the various precursors of RBCs. Proerythroblast, the basophilic erythroblast. So when you look at the complete stages of RBCs, we find that the cell size has reduced. It keeps on reducing. There is a condensation of the nucleus. So you look at this, the nucleus becomes more and more condensed, compact. Eventually, it disappears when it forms the complete mature RBC. In reticulocyte, which are the precursor RBCs or the apprentines RBC, there will be a few loose strands of RNA. That's how they stain blue, right? So these precursor RBCs, however, can be found in the circulation. Around 2% is the normal population seen in the circulation. It will be increased in case of hemolysis. So when you look at these stages, there is a gradual reduction in the cell diameter and increasing of the nuclear condensation. So these are the various pictures of the precursors taken of the bone marrow on the high part. Proerythroblast, then comes the early normoblast. It's a large purple nucleus, denser nucleus. The cell size is reduced as compared to the previous precursor. Comes next is the intermediate normoblast. Then the pycnotic late normoblast. These are the reticulocytes, and then the RBCs. So just to see what is a normal RBC like, so we call it as normocytic, normochromic. So we use the reference of a nucleus of small lymphocyte for the size of the RBC, and the pallor has to be only up till the 1/3 of the size of the RBC. Only then we can term it as normochromic. Any increase in the pallor, it will be termed as hypochromic. Next, just a note about hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is composed of 4 globin chains, alpha and beta chains, which is centered around a heme group. Heme group has a porphyrin ring with an iron atom in the center. Now, basis this background, we start with the anemias. The clinical presentation of anemias will start from milder features such as skin is pale, there is a pallor, there is coldness, there is weakness, there is a fatigue, to severe symptoms such as angina pectoris, chest pain, heart attack, palpitations, fainting, and many more. These are the normal reference ranges. The reference ranges for both male and female are different. So for example, hemoglobin is 14 to 17 for males, for females 12 to 16. Similarly for RBC count, more or less 4 to 5.5 is for the RBC count. MCV falls in between 80 to 100 femtoliters, MCH, and so on. There are different ranges for the neonates, infants, as well as in cord blood. So when you run a sample of a patient with an absolutely healthy condition, no anemia, nothing, this is the printout, or these will be the findings which we get on the analyzer. Perfectly fine. You look at this graph, the MCV is properly, the graph is for exactly centric position. You look at the RDW, you look at the MCH, all the indices are very well in the range. Coming next to the grading of anemia. Anemia can be graded into mild, moderate, severe, and so on. So within normal limits, mild is anywhere between 10 to the lower normal limit. Moderate is 8 to 10. Serious grade of anemia is like 6.5 to 7.9. And life-threatening is less than 6.5. So the first three basic measures. So while we are doing a sample processing, the first three basic measures which needs to be taken into account are first the hemoglobin, RBC and hematocrit. These are those three measures which will actually lead to the diagnosis of the first preliminary diagnosis of anemia. There is a rule of thumb, we say RBC multiplied by 3 is hemoglobin and hemoglobin in turn multiplied by 3 is the hematocrit. Anything which is discordant or which does not match this means we are in trouble. There is something to be investigated. There is an anemia. So the next set of indices which we need to start looking into the printouts is the MCV. MCV we know is the total volume of RBCs divided by the RBC count. Normal is 92 plus minus 9 femtoliters. 80 to 100 we normally say MCV. Next index of importance is MCH, which is the average amount of hemoglobin in each RBC. So hemoglobin total divided by the RBC count will give us an MCH. Next is the MCHC, which is the average concentration of hemoglobin in the packed red cells. So what we do is hemoglobin divided by PCV will give us an MCHC. Having done this, it is important to look at the RDW as well. It is basically the variation in the size of the RBCs from the normal size. So for example, we have a huge variation, say poikilocytosis, even isocytosis, then the RDW is going to be high, right? The normal range is around 12.8 plus minus 1.2 or 1.5. The next important thing we need to see is the reticulocyte count, which is called as the RBC2B or the precursor RBCs. These are the non-nucleated RBCs, as we already discussed, which may still contain RNA. That's why they stain like this. If you look at this picture, they stain like this. Normal range 0.5 to 2.5% of all the RBCs. The next index, which is very important nowadays, is reticulocyte production index. What is the need to calculate this? So first, let me look at the tell you the formula. The RPI is calculated as corrected retic percent divided by the maturation correction. So what is the need to calculate a corrected retic percent? What happens is retic percentage is a percentage. It is not an absolute number. Okay. So what we do is we're just calculating the percentage of reticulocytes in the RBCs count. When in anemia, the RBC count is going to be reduced. So when we calculate a retic percentage, we are going to get a retic percentage erroneously high. So we need to have a correction for the anemic picture, that is the decrease in RBC. So that is corrected by or calculated by retic percentage multiplied by the ratio of hematocrit divided by the normal hematocrit. The normal hematocrit taken up is 45 in this case. Next we come to the maturation correction. Now why is this needed? Maturation correction is helped. Why? Because when in case of a normal setting, the reticulocytes will survive for a day or so when in a normal setting. But if there is anemia, these prematurely released reticulocytes, they may survive for longer. So maybe a day or 1.5 day, 2 day or so on, right? So this is where the maturation correction will help us. So this is the table which gives us the maturation correction factor versus the hematocrit. So if you have a normal hematocrit, the retic survival is like normal 1 day. But suppose if you have a hematocrit as low as 16 to 25, you'll have a maturation correction as 2. So for a person who has a retic percentage of about 5%, hemoglobin 7.5 grams, and hematocrit 25%, the RPI will be anything like corrected retic percentage divided by maturation correction as per the formula. It will come, we divide by 2 as per the table, and we get it as 1.4. Or simpler calculation is just to multiply the corrected retic count by 0.5. That is, we are using the maturation correction as 2. Underlies, we are not doing as per the table, we're just using it as 2. So this gives you the RPI, which is nothing but the reticulocyte production index. The cutoff generally taken is 2. So any RPI less than 2, we know the bone marrow is like not functioning up to optimal. And if it is more than 2, we know it is stressed, it is over functioning. So for anemia classification, based on reticulocyte count or the RPI, we have this. If there is a decreased production, means the bone marrow is hypoproliferative. That is well evidenced or well seen when the RPI is less than 2. And suppose in cases where the bone marrow is stressed or over-functioning, there is increased destruction peripherally, the bone marrow is responsive, we have an RPM more than 2. That is more so in the hemolytic picture. Coming next to the other classifications of anemia, morphological classification, which is the most widely used, or rather the basic classification to start with, and then we build blocks on it, right? So morphological classification, etiological classification, and the classification on reticulocyte, which we already discussed. So morphological classification is the normocytic, microcytic, and macrocytic. Just a moment. Okay. So based on the etiology, after this morphological classification, we'll classify into as per the etiology as well. So it could be blood loss, or either because of inadequate production of the normal blood cells, or because of excessive destruction of the blood cells. So MCV, when the MCV is lesser than 80, we know we are dealing with a microcytic anemia. In case when the MCV is normal, then we know it is a normocytic kind of a picture. And when it is more than 100, it is a macrocytic kind of a picture. Building on this, if you look at these graphs, the microcytic, the graph is shifted towards the left. In normocytic, the graph is centrally placed, meaning the MCV is absolutely fine and well within the range. And macrocytic, the graph is pushed towards the right. Coming next, to classify these anemias into the various etiologies or various causes. Microcytic anemia, the etiologies by far are iron deficiency anemia, chronic infectious, thalassemias, hemoglobinopathies, sideroblastic anemia. Similarly, for normocytic, you will have chronic disease, early IDA, primary marrow disorders, increased destruction. Macrocytic anemia, the major chunk is by the megaloblastic anemias, liver disease, alcohol, metabolic disorders, and so on. This chart gives us the complete etiology of the various anemias. So either because of the defective production or impaired production, or because of the excessive red cell destruction. So impaired production can occur because of various host of deficiency of nutrients, iron deficiency anemia, megaloblastic anemia, chronic disease, sideroblastic anemia. We'll do them one by one in the subsequent slides. So how do we start the diagnosis of anemia? This is the grand chart or algorithm for anemia workup. So primarily now I'll start with only the first step. Okay, so we have a patient sample in our laboratories. We look at the CBC, we know the hemoglobin is screwed, we know the PBS, we see the peripheral smear, we look at the indices, we know it's anemia for sure, right? So first is classification based on MCV. So less than 80, we just spoke microcytic, normocytic, and macrocytic. So we stop here. We'll come back We'll come back to this chart again once we finish the complete presentation, and we'll look if we have covered all the points. So first is microcytic anemia. Okay, before that, let us just have a look at the various morphologies encountered in the various anemias. So look at microcytic hypochromic. The reference here again, as I said, is the nucleus of small lymphocyte. The RBC is well smaller than that. Look at this RBC, they're all smaller than that. So it's definitely the pallor is increased. We know it's for sure microcytic hypochromic anemia. Similarly, for normocytic anemia, the size looks good. The pallor is absolutely proper, optimum. So we know we are in NN kind of an anemia. And if we look at this third picture, for sure we have a macrocyte sitting here compared to the small lymphocyte, right? So now we have the first kind of anemia is microcytic hypochromic anemia. The MCV is less than 80. The next investigation of choice should be serum ferritin. Yes, we may argue that we have an RBC count as well. So RBC count, if it is low, along with the low MCV, we know we are dealing somewhere with iron deficiency anemia. And RBC count slightly high or normal with the low MCV, we may have a picture of thalassemia. But then this may not lead you to a conclusive diagnosis. For that, we need to follow the various steps. So serum ferritin, right? So if the serum ferritin iron studies are on the lower side, we know we have an IDA. If, however, these studies are normal, we'll have to opt for a hemoglobin electrophoresis. If hemoglobin electrophoresis report is absolutely normal, we know we are into anemia of chronic disease or sideroblastic anemia types. And if it is abnormal, then we are dealing with thalassemia. So for any standard hypochromic microcytic anemia, this will be the PBS. The peripheral smear is going to be such, with all kind of beautiful cells and isocytosis, poikilocytosis, microcytosis, hypochromia is the hallmark. There'll be increased central pallor. We may also see these elliptocytes or pencil-shaped cells. So for the summary of IDA, we'll have all the indices reduced, RBC count reduced. The RDW is going to be widened. Why? Because we have all sorts of RBC, small, big, normocytic, some of them normocytic also. And we'll have a shift to left of the graph. The other indices are reduced. RPI is going to be less than 2. Our reticulocyte production index is going to be less than 2. Now coming to the iron studies, serum ferritin will be very low. Serum iron will also be low, but the TIBC, total iron binding capacity, will be increased. When you look at the bone marrow picture, it will be mild to moderate hyperplasia. There will be high cellularity. Okay, and it is going to show us micronormoblastic erythropoiesis. Now, what is a micronormoblastic erythropoiesis? We'll have erythroblasts, which are like polychromatic, which are pycnotic cytoplasm, vacuolated, irregular, smaller in size. So this is the kind of a picture we may see in IDA. And if you stain the marrow for iron stores by Prussian blue, look at these are the normal marrow pictures. But as and when the anemia progresses, there is hardly any stainable iron present. So bone marrow iron stain, absent iron. So for a patient sample which we receive and who's suffering from IDA, these are the various indices we can see, the various lab findings. The hemoglobin is reduced, the RBC count is reduced, hematocrit is reduced, all the RBC indices are reduced, and the RDW is classically high. So we know we are dealing with IDA. So what happens in these iron stores? Initially, these stores are normal, but as time passes, the person passes through various stages like negative iron balance, then iron deficient erythropoiesis, and finally frank IDA sets in. So what will be the iron studies? How will they look like? Serum ferritin is reduced. As I said, iron will be reduced, saturation percentage will be reduced, but TIBC is going to be classically high, very high rather. And bone marrow iron is absolutely absent. So for just a comparison amongst all the microcytic anemias, a summary is this. So if you're dealing with IDA, we just spoke, TIBC is going to be high. But if it is a chronic infection, the TIBC will also be low. Though there are, the bone marrow will have iron. The Pearl stain is going to be positive. Similarly, for thalassemia, the serum iron will be high. Plus the TIBC is going to be normal. And the bone marrow will have a huge positivity for the stain, Pearl stain. Hemoglobinopathies and lead poisoning, everything is going to stay normal. The serum iron TIBC is normal and the bone marrow Pearl stain will be positive. And they have a classical history of some poisoning, some issues. The patient will elicit those histories. In sideroblastic anemia, in addition to having a high serum iron and the bone marrow staining positive, they'll have ringed sideroblast. They'll have a ringed sideroblast, something like this, on Prussian blue stain. Coming to thalassemia, the next subset of microcytic hypochromic anemia, we'll have all the indices down. Hemoglobin is reduced, MCV, all the indices are reduced. RBC, the peripheral blood smear will show us these NRBCs, stippled NRBCs, oval jolly bodies, target cells, hypochromic cells, microcytic cells. All these kind of picture will be seen. In bone marrow, we may see again a erythroid hyperplasia and a whole lot of erythroid precursors. We do a hemoglobin electrophoresis. We know there are decreased or absent globin chains. We know there is a reticulocytosis also in addition to it. And we clinch the diagnosis with electrophoresis. Coming next to macrocytic anemia. Macrocytic anemia, where the MCV is more than 100 femtoliters. The next step should be reticulocyte count. If it is increased, we know we are dealing with hemolytic anemia, acute blood loss. And suppose in conditions where the reticulocyte count is normal or low, we have to dig in deep for history of liver disease, drugs, hypothyroidism. If there is a history, well and good, we have done our job. If not, we have to check for examination. Now, once with bone marrow examination, there are two conditions. Either the bone marrow is a megaloblastic one or it's a non-megaloblastic. If it's a normoblastic, then it's a liver disease, hypothyroidism. In case there is myelodysplasia, we are dealing with a myelodysplastic syndrome. If it's hypocellular, we have bone marrow infiltrations, aplastic anemia, tumor infiltration, and so on. And so, of course, if it is a megaloblastic, we know it's folate or vitamin B12 deficiency. So as I already said, the bone marrow picture could be either megaloblastic macrocytic or a non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemias. These are the various etiologies under the non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemia. So for any macrocytic anemia, what will be the picture? We'll have a low to normal reticulocyte count. There'll be macrocytosis. If we are not dealing with hemolysis, then a lower normal reticulocyte count. Macrocytosis, these macrocytes can either be oval and round, depending upon the etiology. We'll have an elevated MCV, MCHC. There could be a pancytopenia, depending upon the cause. Like if it is a megaloblastic anemia, we will be encountering pancytopenia. There will be anisocytosis, there's going to be poikilocytosis, we can see this. But if we start getting in hypersegmented neutrophils, we have a macroovalocyte, then we know we are dealing with somewhere in megaloblastic anemia. In the bone marrows, we'll start having a hypercellular marrow, there'll be megaloblast, early erythroblast, which will have a sieve-like chromatin, and there will be a nuclear NC ratio asynchrony, So there is a defect in the maturation, rather we say a megaloblastic kind of a maturation is there. We may have Howell-Jolly bodies, we may have Cabot rings, there will be also cystocytes or RBC fragments.
Dr. Preet, only 2 minutes are left, so please.
When I started late, you'll have to give me just,
Yeah,
I'll rush.
okay. You just rush.
So marrow failure. So these are the various pictures for the megaloblastic anemia, hypersegmented neutrophils. I'll just skip all these. Okay, so the stippled chromatin, stippled RBC, Cabot rings, giant platelets. We need to do the test like folate and B12 levels, Schilling test. And then to look at the etiologies, we may do antiparietal cell antibodies, anti-IF antibodies. So for other disorders, which are non-megaloblastic anemias, macrocytic, like in alcoholism or liver disease, we may not have the classical macroovalocytes. We may just have macrocytes, which are round and not oval. And there'll be target cells also, which are so classical of liver disease. Coming next to the normocytic anemia. Normocytic anemia, if the reticulocyte count is high, we know we're dealing with the hemolytic anemia. And in case of the normal or low reticulocyte count, we'll have to check out for any underlying chronic disease, renal failure. If yes, then we know we're dealing with such kind of a diseases. If no, then we go for a bone marrow. Bone marrow examination, if normal, that means in the first place, such kind of a disease, a chronic disease has been missed. So we have to dig deep for renal failure or chronic disease. And if the bone marrow is abnormal, we know we are dealing with an aplastic anemia or bone marrow disorders. These are the various anemia, chronic diseases which may lead to the presentation of anemia of chronic disease. So what will be the classical picture? We'll have a normocytic anemia with reduced reticulocyte count, which will be normochromic also. The bone marrow will be suppressed. There will be decreased serum iron, decreased TIBC, but yes, normal stores. There will be increased marrow iron as well, and the ESR will be high because of the various diseases, chronic diseases accompanying the anemia. These are the various RBC shapes and sizes seen in various other chronic diseases. These are the chinocytes, which spicules more than 10. These are the canthocytes. These are the cystocytes, the fragments. Coming next to stomatocytes, so classically seen in liver disease, alcoholism, target cells, liver disease, thalassemia, teardrop cells. These are another list, a big list of other RBCs seen. Okay, in aplastic anemia, there will be a classical pancytopenia. So if you look at this, the peripheral blood picture, and if you look at the marrow, the aplastic anemia can either be inherited or it can be acquired also. More apt will be this picture. If you look at this, you compare the normal bone marrow compared to aplastic bone marrow. Other bone marrow conditions can be myelodysplastic syndrome, but here you may have hypercellular bone marrow. This is one differentiating point with aplastic anemia. Then you may have infiltration by acute leukemias or tumors. Coming next to hemolytic anemia. hemolytic anemias will generally have an increased reticulocyte count. They will have a, okay. So for hemolytic anemia, peripheral smear becomes very critical. So they'll have a low hemoglobin, they'll have a raised indirect serum bilirubin, they'll have reticulocytosis. So these are the various cells, like spherocytes will be seen in hereditary spherocytosis. But if the direct antiglobulins are positive, we know it is also a feature of autoimmune hemolytic anemia. If we are looking at cystocytes in peripheral smear, we know we are dealing with microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. And if we have a microcytic hypochromic cells, we know it is thalassemia. Sickle cells, if seen on peripheral smear, sickle cell disorders, bite cells in G6PD deficiencies, and so on. So these are the various causes of hemolytic anemia. So this is important. First, we need to know whether there is a hemolysis. We need to first establish that the hemolysis is occurring. That is by raised reticulocyte polychromasia, NRBCs on peripheral smear, erythroid hyperplasia and bone marrow, indirect bilirubin is raised, urobilinogen is raised. Once we have established that the hemolysis is present, it is important to know what is the cause of hemolysis. So for all that, we do these tests: blood smear, hemoglobin electrophoresis, osmotic fragility test, G6PD test, malaria antigen, microangiopathic antibodies, Coombs test, etc. So what are the findings? According to the findings, we can classify into the hemolytic anemia. As I said, the hemoglobin electrophoresis, direct, indirect antiglobulin test, all this will be able to help to classify the hemolytic anemia. Next, for spherocytes, you can see this is a peripheral smear. We have spherocytes, classical spherocytes. Similarly, for sickle cell, we see this. The bone marrow will be mildly hyperplastic. Electrophoresis will show us the HBS. Sickling test is positive. Similarly, for G6PD, these are the classical bite cells. These are the Hins bodies on peripheral smear, which we can see. There will be polychromasia as well. Next is the autoimmune hemolytic anemias. These will test positive on the antibodies, Coombs test. We'll have classical cystocytes, the red cell fragments. And if you look at this, okay, these are the lab findings on the microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. If you look at this, everything is low except for the RDW, which is very much high, right? So this is one classical sign again. And on the peripheral smear, you can see all these. Red cell fragments, you can see spherocytes, you can see these fragments, non-specific fragments, polychromasia. That means you're dealing with microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Lastly, we come to dimorphic anemia. Dimorphic anemia is any picture where there are two deficiencies or we get two kinds of populations, both microcytic and macrocytic. Now, this could be either due to iron deficiency anemia coexistent with the macrocytic anemia or megaloblastic anemia. Now, for such kind of an anemia, peripheral smear is very critical to assess the cause. RDW is highly increased. That's why, precisely because the variation in the size of blood cells is high. So that's why RDW is high. And we'll have to do the specific test to determine the cause. Now coming back to this gentleman again, the diagnosis, the grand chart, we'll just have a look whether we've completed everything. So we said iron studies, we said...
Dr.
Yeah, sir, we've done almost.
To conclude now.
Yeah, sir, I have last slide. So the take home message is that the hemoglobin percentage, yes, I'm done. Hemoglobin percentage is low, we need to check the indices. So once you've checked the indices, then we start looking for the reticulocyte count. It is less than 2 or if it is more than 2. Then we start eliciting, or we need to ask the patient for history, whether it is a blood loss, acute, chronic, occult, we have to check all that. If it is hyperproliferative or hemolytic or hemorrhagic. If it is hyperproliferative, then whether it is microcytic or macrocytic. Microcytic, the most common picture encountered is iron deficiency. If it's a macrocytic, start looking into megaloblastic. If it's normocytic, we know it could be one of those hemolytic anemias. Pancytomania means clinches the diagnosis, megaloblastic and aplastic anemia. Peripheral smear study is very critical for the diagnosis of anemia. If reticulocytes are high, then we need to do the specific test. Thank you everyone for the patient hearing in your time.
Thank you, Dr. Preet and Dr. Sunita Rai for this wonderful session. So in this morning, we had very interactive and very good hematology session covering all aspects of anemia, peripheral smear, coagulation, and newer parameters, how this newer cell counters can help us in the evaluation of different hematological diseases. Now we are concluding this first session. Thanks to all speakers and chairpersons